Welcome, everyone. If you can see and hear me, please drop your name and location into the chat. All right, I see Pennsylvania, Texas, Chicago, Georgia, Arkansas, Illinois, Portugal, Calgary, Scotland. There's so many of you coming in. This is great. I can't even keep up. The messages are moving so quickly. It sounds like everything is working and you can see and hear me. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We just have a couple of housekeeping items before we get started with Jessica Brody today. So officially welcome. My name is Michelle Adams with ProWritingAid. We're so glad to have you here. We have established that everything seems to be working according to plan. So just a couple housekeeping items today. If you would like to ask a question, please remember to use the Q&A box specifically. As you can see, the chat moves very quickly. You are welcome to chat with other attendees today, but you just want to make sure that if you have a question for Jessica or a question for me, that you are in fact using the Q&A box so that we do not miss it. Also, hold just a second. Sorry, guys, getting my screens in order here. Okay, back in working order. All right, so use the Q&A box for any questions, please. And whenever you are chatting, if you would like to send a message to everyone, please make sure that in the menu next to to, you select everyone in the dropdown. Otherwise, it just comes to the host and panelist. So feel free to chat and feel free to ask as many questions as you would like. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can today. Jessica does have a nice presentation for you, and then we will have Q&A at the end. And also, if you would like to see the replay of today's session, you can catch that on the Hub and on our YouTube channel for 2 weeks after the event. So everyone will have access to that replay for 2 weeks. So if you would like to see anything again, feel free to watch it there. So with that being said, I think we are ready to begin. So once again, hello, I'm Michelle from ProWritingAid, and today I am joined by Jessica Brody. Acclaimed author and story coach Jessica Brody has written and published over 20 novels for teens, tweens, and has been hired by Disney Press to write several books based on popular Disney franchises, such as Descendants and Lego Disney Princess. Jessica is also the author of the #1 best-selling plotting guide for novelists, Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and the founder of Writing Mastery Academy. Her new book, Save the Cat Writes a Young Adult Novel, was officially released today, and it's already a #1 Amazon bestseller. So you're going to hear more about that from her, and make sure that you check that out. So Jessica, hello. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to officially hand the reins over to you, and then I will be back for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you everyone for coming. It's so exciting to see all of these people from all over the world. This is just so exciting. I love talking to ProWritingAid people. You all are the best. You always have the best questions. You're always so excited. So I'm excited to be here today, and I'm going to launch right into the presentation so we have plenty of time to get your questions answered at the end. All right, so today we're here to talk about a topic that I love talking about, which is character arc meets story arc. I think we talk a lot about plot and story, but I don't think people talk enough about the interweaving of the two and how important it is to make sure that your character arc and your story arc are blended seamlessly and have like this kind of perfect marriage of storytelling magic. So that's what we're going to focus our study on today. Before I get into that, I just want to give you a little backstory on myself. I have a backstory of rejection, which is very familiar among novelists. This is actually a picture of my stack of rejection letters when I was first trying to get my very first novel represented by an agent. I had over 100 rejections from agents on that book. And, I look back at the book now and I can really understand why I was rejected by so many people. It's because the book had no story. I really had no idea how to tell a story. I loved writing witty dialogue. I loved delving into characters' backstories and all of that, but I had no cohesive story. And I definitely didn't have a story arc and a character arc woven seamlessly together. So it would take a very magic book to help me understand what I was doing wrong. And that book was called Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. It was originally a screenwriting guide. And at the time, that was the only guide out in the Save the Cat world. And I read the book and it made so much sense to me that I ended up rewriting my failed manuscript using the method that Blake Snyder laid out in this book. And I ended up selling that book. I got an agent for it. The agent sold it within 10 days actually of going on submission, which is actually really fast. And this is me on the release day of my first book. And I've been writing ever since using the Save the Cat method. This year, I released my 20th novel, and there's me on release day of my 20th novel. And I'm so pleased to be joining you today on the release day of my newest Save the Cat book, which I'll talk about in a minute. So it's all sorts of fun release day pictures today. So yes, I have been writing for over 15 years now using this method. I've sold over 20 novels to major publishers like Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, and Macmillan. And I really owe it all to this method. I am so passionate about it. It saved my career. Yes, the joke, Save the Cat saved my career. And I hope that it will save your book as well if it needs saving. All right. So when I first used this method to start writing my own novels, one of the questions that was lingering in the back of my mind was, well, this is a screenwriting method that just happened to work for my books. Does it work for all novels, or am I just sort of a weird fluke? And that's when I started to dive a little deeper into novels, and I started to reread some very famous and popular novels using the lens of this Save the Cat method, like as a kaleidoscope or as like a microscope, to really see, does this method apply to all novels? And I found something very interesting. So I read books and analyzed books like mystery novels like The Girl on the Train, horror, romance, young adult fantasy, middle grade fantasy, even classics like The Grapes of Wrath. And I found when I looked at these books through the lens of Save the Cat, I found that they all had these very eerie things in common. For instance, I found that all of these novels around the 10% mark, around 10% of the way through these stories, they all had some sort of life-changing event that really kind of kicked the action into gear. I found that around 20% of all of these, 20% of the way through all these stories, the hero did something new, made some kind of proactive decision, or tried something new. And around 50% of the way through all these stories, there was a big, major plot-turning twist. And around 3/4 of the way through all of these stories, the character hit some kind of rock bottom or felt like some sort of loss. And that around 80 to 85% of the way through all these novels, the hero found some sort of resolution and had another kind of breakthrough and made another proactive decision. Okay, so that's either a really strange coincidence, or I had stumbled upon something very interesting, which I like to call the secret storytelling code. It is the exact same pattern that Blake Snyder found in movies. I found it in novels, and I kept reading novels, and I kept finding this code buried within the structure of all great novels. And I thought, okay, so Save the Cat is not just a screenwriting method. It's a storytelling method. And there's something within our DNA as humans, as readers and moviegoers and story receivers that is designed to respond to these plot points given to us in a certain order. And that's what I call the secret storytelling code. It is the heart of the Save the Cat method. And these 5 beats, which actually have slightly different names in the Save the Cat method, we call them the catalyst, the break into 2, the midpoint, the all is lost, and the break into 3. These are the 5 points we're actually going to focus on today, because these are the foundational beats that hold your story structure together. All right. So from there, once I made this important discovery that inside all great novels, there was this storytelling code, I decided I needed to share that with the world. So I wrote this book, Save the Cat Writes a Novel. It came out back in 2018. And since then, I've just been inundated and overwhelmed positively with amazing messages and feedback from writers who are using this method as I did and they're finding great success in it. And that's fantastic. And I've been doing so many webinars like this, and I've been doing lots of Q&As, and I've been collecting all of these questions and all of these new ways of looking at the method. Since 2018, I've learned a lot about storytelling, and I decided I needed to write another book. I needed to put all of this new stuff that I've discovered, all of these questions that I've been asked, I need to answer them, and I decided to put them into a new edition of Save the Cat, which I decided to focus around the young adult books, young adult novels. I've written tons of young adult novels. They are very close to my heart. And I felt that they are specific enough that even though they don't quite have a different structure as any other novel, they deserve their own microscope to see exactly how they work and how the Save the Cat method applies to them. So releasing today, actually, ooh, I'm like all sorts of nerves today. Releasing today is my newest Save the Cat book called Save the Cat Writes, a young adult novel where I laser focus the study of story structure on the young adult categorization. However, if you don't write young adult novels, I think you'll also find there's a lot of new great content in here that can help any novelists. As I said, I answer a lot of questions that came out of the first book, like how do you write multiple point of view with the Save the Cat method? I did a deep dive into that. How do you write a series using the Save the Cat method? I have an entire chapter dedicated to series. So that book is out today, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, if you hang around until the end, I'm going to reveal a secret, not so secret link where you can get actually a free bonus ebook for the new book that will have 100 pages of extra content that I had to cut from the manuscript because it was too long. And I've put it into a bonus ebook that you can get for free. So I'll tell you how to get that at the end. Okay, so what exactly is the Save the Cat method? For those of you who are new, this is a great introduction. This presentation will get you jump started and off and running with the method. For those of you who are familiar with the method already, this is actually going to be a great refresher and will probably give you some new insights and perspectives and aha moments that you might not have had before. So exactly what is the method? Well, as we saw with my slide about the storytelling code, is essentially it's a structure blueprint. It helps us define a series of plot points, or beats as we call it in the method, that can be found in all successful novels. And at the same time, it's also a method to help us track a compelling character transformation. That's why I like to call it a transformation machine. Basically, an imperfect hero goes into your story and a less imperfect hero comes out of your story. So today that topic is story arc versus story arc with character arc. We want to make sure those are blended seamlessly, and it's no surprise that the Save the Cat method is actually designed to help you blend those two seamlessly together. So at its core, the Save the Cat method boils down to this thing we call the Save the Cat beat sheet. So remember, a beat is just a plot point. But basically, we take the classic 3-act structure you've probably already heard about, and we break it down even further into 15 beats. These beats are designed to make your story more compelling, to help you with pacing, to help hold your reader's attention, and to leave your reader feeling satisfied, because they follow that storytelling code that is buried within all novels and has been since the beginning of novels. So it's not like we're reinventing or doing anything new here. All we're doing is looking at classic stories and modern stories, finding that hidden code, that blueprint, and following it to make sure our novels are successful as well. When do you want to use this method? Well, the obvious answer is when you're outlining. It's a great outlining method for those of you who like to plot or plan in advance. For those of you who don't like to plot or plan in advance, I recommend using it at the end of your first draft. So when you're revising an existing story and you have a bunch of pages that you now need to put to the test, make sure that they work, move things around to make sure that your story is compelling, and really just figure out what to do to revise your novel. This is a great revision tool. It's a great revision checklist. It's a great revision strategy. It's also great if you're in the middle of the novel and you can't figure out what's broken, something's not working. You can come back to this beat sheet that's at the heart of both of my books and that we're going to talk about today. And you can look at your book and see what's missing here. What am I not doing? And that can help you diagnose problems in your manuscript. I love it personally for test driving new ideas. I never even start a full beat sheet until I've done sort of a test beat sheet. Like, how many ideas can I get out really quickly? How many beats can I get out really quickly for my new novel idea? If the beats are coming pretty fast and furious, even though I'll probably change them, I know that this idea can go the distance. If I'm struggling to come up with even a few beats, I might not pursue that idea. It's also great for getting back on track after you've wandered 300 miles off course of your current story, which, let's face it, we've all been there. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to break down, as I said, those 5 most important foundational beats of any novel. I'm going to use popular examples to illustrate how these beats work. And I actually do have a multiple POV example at the end for those of you who are interested in multiple POV. Stay tuned for that. I know I get that question a lot. And we're going to, again, focus on how these beats form the foundation of not just your plot, but your character transformation as well. And then at the end, we'll have some time to answer questions. So it is my sincere hope that by the end of this webinar, you will have a better understanding of what makes good stories good, what makes great stories great, and what makes them successful. You'll also have that easy to follow blueprint of only 5 beats. You can just start with 5 beats. Even though we have 15 in the method, I'm just going to give you those first 5 to get you started. But you'll be able to use these 5 as a blueprint to outline, write, or revise any novel of any genre. Okay, one last question. Why is it called Save the Cat? Before we get started. For the Save the Cat title actually references a tip in the original screenwriting book, which is also in my books as well. But it's the moment in a story when a hero does something redeeming, like save a cat. They don't have to really save a cat. It's just that moment when the audience really gets behind the hero of the story. So, classic example from the movie Aladdin. Aladdin steals a loaf of bread. He's a thief. He's not super likable at the beginning. But then what does he do with that loaf of bread after he's chased all over the marketplace? Well, he gives it to a starving mother and child. And now we're on Aladdin's side. That is his save the cat moment. Do all novels need one? No. But if you have an unlikable hero or a hero who maybe is less than likable at the start, this is a great tip. And it's not the only tip. It's not the biggest tip. It's not the best tip in the book. It just had the best title, so they put it on the cover. Okay, so diving into our study of story. Inside every novel, there's actually 2 stories going on. There is an external story and an internal story. The external story you can think about as the things that are happening on the outside of your hero, the things that are happening outside of them. While the internal story is the stuff that's happening to your hero on the inside. Another way of thinking about it is external stories are story elements that you can see. Like if you were in the story, you'd be able to see what was happening to the hero because it's happening outside. Versus internal story elements are things as the reader that you can feel. You wouldn't necessarily be able to see them in the scene, but you can feel them inside your hero, inside the character. External stories directly relate to the premise of the story. So the premise is really the reason that your reader is coming to the story. It's the pitch, it's the hook, it's everything that's external and cool about your story. While the internal story directly relates to the theme of your story, the reason you're writing it, the thing you really want to pass on to your reader, that is going to lie in the internal story. The external story is usually driven by what the hero wants. What are they actively, externally pursuing? What are they out there trying to get? That's what they want. While the internal story, as you can probably guess, is driven by what the hero needs. What do they actually need to get out of this story? Why are they in this story to begin with? Probably to transform in some way. Probably to fix or overcome or discover some type of flaw that needs to be fixed. That's what your hero really needs, and that ties to the internal story. So I like to think of the external story as sort of the flashy story. It's the reason the reader picks up the book. It's the exciting stuff. It's the space battles and the makeout scenes in the hallway and the fights in the cafeteria and epic battles and all the chases and all of the external stuff is very flashy. But the internal story is the part that will really resonate and leave your reader feeling something by the end. So the external story, just to recap it all, is why the reader is drawn to the story in the first place, while the internal story is what they're going to remember when they put the book down. So these are the two things that are happening in your novel, or that should be happening in your novel. And they're very closely related, actually. Or we can think of them as plot and character transformation. The external story is the external plot that's happening to your character, while the character transformation is the stuff that's happening on the inside because of the plot. So we can look at it like this. Because of plot, your hero undergoes a character transformation. Now, the question is, how do we weave these things together to make sure that they are interrelated, that all of our character transformation is happening because of the plot? Because when you think about it, if you have all plot, all external, all flashy stuff, what kind of impact is it having? Who is it affecting? If it's not affecting anyone, like your hero, it's not going to affect your reader either. On the other hand, we can't really just have all character transformation. We can't have all internal story, because then what's triggering that to happen? If the character could just sit on the couch and have all these internal character transformations, why do we even need a story? So we need organic external things to trigger that character transformation, to push your character out of their comfort zone into new areas so that they can have this transformation. All right, let's look at some examples. And these are examples we're going to follow throughout the presentation today, so you can see how it works all the way through. So The Hunger Games is a great example of an external and an internal story. The A story, that's what we call the external story or the plot, is a stubborn, distrustful teen who believes she is powerless to change her unjust world, volunteers to take her sister's place in the Hunger Games, a televised fight to the death against 23 other teens. Wow, super flashy, lots of external things, lots of conflict happening. While the B story, or what we call the internal story or the character transformation, the thing that's happening on the inside, is a stubborn, distrustful teen girl finds the power within herself to defy the real enemy of the Hunger Games, which are not the 23 other tributes, and takes the first step toward battling the injustices of her world. Now, when we put these two things together, we can honestly say that because of this external story, the character experiences this internal transformation. And that is the key to making sure that your two stories are interlinked. Let's look at a contemporary character-driven story. So that was a very plot-driven story. I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez is a very character-driven story, and yet it has the same two stories within it. It has an A story, external plot, which is a Mexican-American teen girl burdened by her uncontrolling mother, overwhelmed by her anger, and haunted by her sister's shadow, embarks on a quest to unearth the truth about her sister's life after her untimely death. The sister's untimely death, in case that's unclear. Now, that's all happening on the outside. On the inside, we have a story about a Mexican teen girl who develops empathy for her mother and learns how to express her grief and emotions in a healthier way. That is all happening because of the plot. Or we could say, once again, because this all happens, she undergoes a character transformation. So those are the two ways to look at it. So how are these things interrelated? How do we make sure that they're interwoven? Well, you can look at it like this. Plot plus character transformation equals structure. This is the way we structure our story. We make sure that the plot and the character transformation weave together. I like to call structure the romantic dance of structure. It's a term I use a lot in the new book, because the way that I started to look at it recently was that all of this is a choreographed dance that you, the writer, are choreographing for your characters. And it looks something like this, the dance of structure. We have external plot points, things that happen on the outside, which trigger some type of internal reflection or realizations for our characters, which inspire our characters to do external things proactively. which of course just create more external plot points, because whatever they're doing is going to create conflict. It's going to create new goals. It's going to create new enemies. And that is going to trigger more internal realizations, more proactive decisions, and on we waltz through the entire story until we get to the end, where we have the biggest external plot point, the biggest internal realization, and the biggest proactive decision that will mark the end of our character transformation. Okay, so let's look at this romantic dance of structure through the eyes of our 5 important plot points, our 5 foundation beats, as we're going to call them today. The 5 foundation beats are the major turning points of your structure. But as you're going to see, these are not just plot points for the external story. They also have the biggest effect on your character transformation. So these are the tent poles that hold up the 10 other beats. Remember, the Save the Cat method has 15 total beats. These are the foundational beats of that structure. And these are the foundations that fortify your structure. I love talking about these 5 foundation beats because not only are they a great starter point for people who maybe are unfamiliar with structure, don't really like to plan in advance, maybe are a little nervous talking about structure or outlines or anything like that. These are great ones to start your outline or revision plan with. And then if you'd like to explore more of the beats, of course, we have the 2 books now. So often these are the easiest beats to identify for as a reader when you're reading a book, but also for yourself as you're writing your new book. So that's why I like to start with them. And I actually start all my own brainstorms with these 5 beats. I lay them down first, and then I figure out what the other beats are. So just really quickly as an overview, we're going to go over all 5 of these. The 5 foundation beats are the catalyst, the break into 2, the midpoint, the all is lost, and the break into 3. We're going to go into each of these in more detail with following through with our examples. And then at the end, we're going to put it all together with another example so you can see everything working together. All right, so the way to read these slides, you've got your the title of the beat up at the top. You can actually see the entire 15-beat roadmap underneath that. The other beats are grayed out because we won't be talking about those today. But if you are curious of how these 5 beats fit within the full 15-beat outline, that's how they fit right there. They are marked with boxes. And then on the side there in the black box, you're going to see roughly where this beat should come in your story. These percentage marks are guidelines. You don't have to take them as gospel. They are just sort of there to roughly give you an idea of, on average, this is where the beat comes in most novels. Okay, so what is the catalyst? It's our first foundation beat, and it is essentially an inciting incident. It's a call to action. The important thing to note about catalysts is after this moment, your hero's life should never be the same. If your hero can go back to the way things were before the catalyst in the first 10% of your story, then the catalyst is not big enough. You have to redesign your catalyst because we want it to be big enough to break through Act 1, which we call the status quo world. So some popular choices you'll often see in novels are tragedies, phone calls with bad news, breakups, divorces, a messenger at the door, maybe a big, exciting opportunity that's presented. That's very popular. Essentially, what this beat is designed to do is to break through the status quo and send the story in a new direction. It gives the reader a cue that this story is on its way. We are moving. So it's something that is done to the hero that will force them to debate. That's a reference to the next beat, which we won't actually talk about, but it forces them to think about what they will do next and eventually push them into a new world in our next beat. So yes, this is an important part of your external story, your external plot, because it's an action beat that happens to the hero that will inspire coming up their big first realization, which will again trigger their big proactive decision. So there's that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 dance that we're seeing start right here. So let's look at our examples. In the Hunger Games, you could probably guess it's the same catalyst in the book and the movie. It's when Prim's name is called at the reaping. That absolutely crash lands into Katniss's world, and it's a very easy catalyst to identify. So I always talk about it first. It's essentially Katniss's life can never be the same after this. So it's a great catalyst. In our quieter contemporary character-driven story, we have this catalyst where Julia sneaks into her dead sister's room and finds some very mysterious items for her supposedly perfect older sister. She finds a note that says, "I love you," a box of sexy lingerie, and a key card to a downtown hotel, making her think that maybe her sister was not as perfect as she thought. But this one item, it's not life-changing stakes, but it's life-changing for Julia because she now has this whole new idea of what her sister might have been. It changes the direction of her story, and that's why it's appropriate for her catalyst. So all catalysts don't have to be life-ending stakes. All right, the catalyst brings us into our next beat, which is our next foundation beat, which is the break into two. So in between the catalyst and the break into two, the characters had some kind of internal realization that inspires them here to make their first proactive decision. The break into two is the moment where the hero decides to either accept a call to action, leave their comfort zone, try something new, venture into a new world or a new way of thinking, or possibly all of the above. You notice the theme in the break into two is new, 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 new. This is our cue to the reader that our story is moving into new territory, and that is exciting. Essentially, the break into two is sort of a dividing beat. It's a threshold between the status quo world of Act 1 and the new upside down world of Act 2. We call it the upside down world because it should feel like it's brand new, very upside down. Things are not familiar anymore. Your hero, however, at this point in the story is still motivated by something that they want, not yet something that they need. Now, remember that want is part of the external story. It's the external thing that your hero is pursuing. At this point in the story, there might be something new that you want to introduce for your hero to pursue, but we want to make sure that it is still external and it is still something that your hero wants, because it's actually going to drive the rest of it's going to drive the plot forward all the way to our next foundation beat, which is the midpoint. So it's very important to define something here for your hero to pursue, as that is going to be the driving force for the next roughly 30% of your novel. Oh, I should note this beat comes at the 20% mark. So why do we call this Act 2? We call it fixing things the wrong way. Why? Well, because your hero's actually not changing the right way. They're not actually learning their big life lesson and having their big character transformation here. That will come much later. Right now, they're changing, but they're not changing the right way. They're changing what I like to call the wrong way. It's not a moral judgment. It's just that it's not the ultimate point of the story. It's not the ultimate point that they chase down this thing that they want at the break into two. The ultimate point of the story is that they transform by the end, but that's going to come later. For now, we just want them chasing down something they want, which is technically the wrong way. So we often will see a new or a modified goal introduced here. We call it the Act 2 goal. And as I said, it's very important to define it here. Every time you're sort of feeling like you're getting lost in the middle of your story, it might be because you haven't defined a concrete, tangible goal for your hero to pursue at the beginning of the second act. I'm telling you, it fixes a lot of problems to just give your hero a direction at this point with a tangible goal. Something external that the hero will pursue through the first half of Act 2. Let's look at our examples so you can really see this goal thing happening in action. In the Hunger Games, the break into two is when Katniss arrives by train in the capital as a tribute. So we see this really very distinct dividing line, this threshold between Act 1, which was District 12, status quo, not great. And Act 2, the capital, glitzy, glamour, very, very different. That's what I mean by that upside down world. After seeing Peeta wave to the crowd at the train station already playing the game, Katniss decides she's not going to trust him. Now, she's already made a couple proactive decisions here. One, she already got on the train. She already volunteered in her sister's place. But we do see her making a very important decision right here at the break into two as well. She decides he is not to be trusted. But her Act 2 goal, which has actually already been established, is that she wants to win the Hunger Games. Obviously, that is a very obvious goal. But she's not there because she wants to make a stand against the Capitol and prove that they don't own her. That's what she eventually needs to do. Right now, she just wants to protect Prim and her family. That's not a bad thing. It's just not the ultimate point of the story, which is why we call it the want and not the need, or fixing things the wrong way and not necessarily the right way. Let's look at our quieter, character-driven story. So after realizing, in the internal realization part, that her sister might not be as perfect as everyone believes, Julia decides, there's that proactive decision, to investigate the truth about her sister's secret life. This is a decision she makes, and it creates her Act 2 goal, which is to prove that her sister wasn't perfect. So she goes to a downtown hotel whose room key she found in Olga's bedroom. Now, note, she's not doing it because she started to empathize with her mother and connect with her family. No, that's what she needs. That'll come later. Right now, she just wants to prove her sister wasn't perfect because she thinks that's going to fix everything, and it won't. That's why it's fixing things the wrong way. But this goal really gives the story direction, and it gives Julia something to do. She thinks the truth will ease her burden and guilt, which is why it's fixing things the wrong way. All right, then we reach the midpoint, the halfway point of your story, biggest turning point of the entire novel. This is literally the middle of the novel, where we also call it the crossroads, because a lot of things are crossing here, particularly your external and internal stories. The pursuit of the Act 2 goal was going to culminate here in either a false victory, meaning the hero has thus far been succeeding in their goal and or has achieved their goal. We can also call that an upward path. Or thus far, your hero has been floundering or has not achieved their goal, which we call a false defeat or a downward path. This is where those two things culminate at this midpoint. Something else that happens at the midpoint is we are introducing another external plot point, another thing that's happening to your hero that's going to raise the stakes and push the hero in a new direction. So again, popular choices we're seeing are plot twists, ticking clocks arriving, shocking reveals being revealed, ramp-ups of the love story, public events are stepping out. These are all kind of things that push the hero forward and force the hero into a new part of the plot. They raise the stakes of the story. So essentially what the midpoint is doing is it's triggering yet another internal realization, which usually inspires a new, modified, or renewed goal for the hero to proactively pursue in the second half of Act 2. So this goal should start to actually move the hero away from those wants and toward the needs. It doesn't mean they're going to actually achieve what they need. They're not going to learn their life lesson here. We're just sort of veering them away from what they want and toward what they need. And I'll give you some examples here. In the Hunger Games, we see a false defeat. So Katniss has been chased up a tree and is about to be killed by the career tributes. Then Peter risks his life to save her. So we have the stakes are raised. Feels like a defeat because we feel like she's going to actually die here. So it does feel like a loss of the goal. But then something happens. This guy that she swore not to trust has saved her life. That changes things for Katniss. This internal realization leads her to wonder if maybe he can be trusted, which challenges her beliefs. Followed shortly after by a modified goal, team up with Rue to blow up the supplies of the career tributes. So all of this shifts the direction of the plot. And now Katniss is looking at Peeta a little differently. She's challenging some of those hardened beliefs from her past. All right. And in I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, we also see a false defeat. I have an example of a false victory coming up in our third example later. She has failed to make progress on her goal and finding the truth about her sister's life. She's basically met a whole bunch of dead ends. Now, this all happens at the quinceañera of Julia's quinceañera, and it feels like another part of her defeat because she feels completely out of place there. She doesn't want to be there. She didn't even want the party to begin with. She knows this party is actually for her dead sister, not for her. That makes it feel worse. And her anger, that kind of internal angst, is intensifying in this moment to the point where she lashes out at one of her aunts. We see sort of an emotional stakes being raised here, and also renews that goal to seek the truth. So we have another proactive decision here. Okay, now we've reached the all is lost, the fourth of our fifth foundation beats. It happens around the 75% mark. This is the lowest point of the novel, an external action where something happens to the hero that pushes them to rock bottom. So it often comes in the form of a defeat, a failure to achieve a goal, or a loss of something important to the hero. But we really want to bring your hero low here. We also typically include, you'll also see in novels that this typically includes something we call a whiff of death, sort of a hint of death. Now, it can be a literal death. Somebody could actually die here. You'll see a lot of mentors die here in classic adventure stories. But something dies, either literal or metaphorical. It can also be the death of a relationship, the death of an idea, the death of a friendship. Something needs to die here because death symbolizes the opportunity for rebirth. And we're cueing to the reader here that the old hero, the old way of thinking is dying so that a new transformed hero can be reborn coming up next. So this is the biggest external plot point that is going to trigger the biggest internal realization for your hero, which is going to inspire the biggest proactive decision yet. In the Hunger Games, we see this playing out when, after successfully blowing up the supplies of the tributes, Rue is caught in a trap and killed by another tribute. And so the whiff of death is a literal death of a person here. But it's a very important death because in her grief, Katniss realizes there is something she can do to defy the Capitol. She has a very important internal realization here. It lights that fire that I would argue continues throughout the rest of the series, that kind of ignites that desire to do something about this injustice. So if Rue hadn't died, maybe the rest of the series wouldn't even take place. That's what I mean by this really important external beat. So she later buries Rue in flowers, which is her first outward act of defiance. And as we'll see in the next beat, she also has another big moment of decision coming up. And in I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, we see in this beat, Julia's mom finds her diary and rips out all the pages containing bad words or references to sex. Julia feels like her mother has stolen her writing, her only joy from her life. That's that loss that she's feeling here. Julia's depression worsens after this, and later she wakes up in a hospital bed after having tried to kill herself. So we have a couple different whiffs of death here. We have a literal whiff of death. She tried to commit suicide. But also we have the death of her freedom, the death of her writing, her joy, lots of kinds of feelings of loss coming at this moment. And then we reach the 80% mark where we have that most important proactive decision yet. The all is lost triggered an internal realization, or we could call it an aha moment, which now inspires the biggest proactive decision yet. This moment should feel like a solution or a resolution, because it's literally a breakthrough where the hero realizes not only what they need to do to fix all the problems from Act 2, the external story, but also to fix themselves, the character transformation. So here we see the ultimate blending of character and story coming at this one beat. The hero learns what they were in this story to learn here. They have discovered what they need. That's why we call Act 3 fixing things the right way. Because at this point, at 80%, they're just having this moment of discovery and this moment of a first proactive decision. You still have 20% of the novel for them to act on that decision and for it to all play out and for them to prove that they really can fix things the right way. But it often results in yet a new goal because they have a new realization about life. They have a new realization of how they're going to fix things. It often comes with a new goal. Not always. Sometimes it's just a modification or renewal of their old goal, but you'll often see new goals here. But that's also why we call Act 3 the synthesis world, because it is the blending of all sorts of things, character and story and everything else that we've experienced. I like to think of it as who the hero was in Act 1, combined with what they've learned in Act 2 equals who they will become in Act 3. The character transformation is nearly complete, but as I said, you have 20% of the novel to finish that off. So in the Hunger Games, we see this beat after the game makers announce that 2 tributes from the same district can win. Katniss makes another proactive decision to team up with Peeta. So her Act 3 goal is to find Peeta and save him. Here, she's letting down her guard and facing some of those trust issues she's had from the beginning. You'll probably notice that there's a mirror to the Act 2 break into 2 moment when she vowed not to trust him. Now, suddenly she's teaming up with him. Isn't that interesting? Fixing things the wrong way, fixing things the right way, and how those 2 moments kind of mirror each other. That's stellar plotting right there. She's also teaming up with Peeta is another step toward proving that the Capitol doesn't own her. And in our contemporary story, after being sent to stay with her extended family in Mexico, where Julia learns about the tragic backstory of her mother's border crossing, that's her internal realization moment, she decides she's going to heal her relationship with her mother. It's a very fraught relationship as established throughout the book. So this is her proactive decision and also her Act 3 goal. So again, sort of another mirror. Remember, her Act 2 goal was to prove that her sister wasn't perfect in order to kind of prove her mother wrong. Now she's looking at it in a new way. I'm going to heal my relationship with my mother instead. She's going to fix things the right way. Before leaving Mexico, she makes a promise to her grandmother to take care of her mother, and that is representing her fixing things the right way. So she's no longer interested in proving her sister wasn't the perfect daughter. In fact, no, I'm not going to tell you what happens because you should read the book. I don't want to spoil it. All right. So if you are interested in going deeper into these, we covered 5 beats of the Hunger Games today. All 15 beats in great detail are actually in the new book, Save the Cat Writes a Young Adult Novel. You'll find the full 15-beat breakdown in that book. So we've now looked at 2 stories that are a little simpler in that they have one point of view. They're not simple stories, but they're simpler in the structure because there's only one character to track. What happens when you're writing multiple points of view? What happens then? How do you kind of combine this external, internal story and all of these beats flying around? Well, let's talk about that for a minute. This is a question I do get asked a lot, which is why I dive very deep into it in the book, in the new book, but I want to give you a highlight here. Essentially, you have 3 options for multiple points of view. You have what's called a single track beat sheet. This is when you really have one beat sheet, one set of beats, whether those are the foundational 5 or all 15. You have one set of them. And that's because all the points of view share the beats. All the characters are having the same catalyst and the same break into 2, and they're kind of doing it all together. You can call this a team beat sheet. They're working as a team. And even though they might be having different internal realizations because they're different people with different flaws, the beats essentially follow the same flow, the same track. On the other hand, you can have what's called a multi-track beat sheet. This is where you're going to track multiple sets of beats, multiple beat sheets. Each POV will have their own. So one will have a catalyst here, another catalyst here that's very different breaks into 2, different midpoints, and they may be staggered throughout the story too. They're not necessarily happening at the same time. Now, this essentially, there's no shared beats. They are all having their own beats, even though they might overlap in certain scenes and they might share scenes together. Their beat sheets remain very separate. Then you can merge the 2 together, which is actually maybe the most popular option, which is called a blended track beat sheet. So this is a combination of single track and multi-track, where POVs will share some beats, but not others. And essentially, their beat sheets will merge and diverge throughout the story, depending on the story you're telling. So as an example of one of these popular blended track beat sheets, I'm going to put everything we've learned together into our 3rd example, which is a dual POV romance. The Sun is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. So let's look at those external and internal stories again. So our A story, our external story, our plot is about a pragmatic Jamaican girl on the brink of deportation and a poetic Korean boy struggling to determine his future, cross paths in an unexpected encounter, igniting a whirlwind romance over the course of one day in New York City. That's all happening on the outside. It's the external story. Because of this external story, we get our 2 character transformations. 2 teens, both facing uncertain futures, discover the power of destiny and the balance between controlling your own life and letting fate take its course. Because of the plot, we have character transformation, and that transpires through our beat sheets, namely our 5 foundation beats. So in our catalyst, we're seeing the heroes Natasha and Daniel meeting. It's a joint catalyst. Their beat sheets are merged here because it's the same event, the same beat that is bringing them together. And it's going to set off a chain of events that change the trajectory of both of their stories. Essentially, neither of their lives will be the same after this, and both will eventually help the other face the challenges that they are facing, like Natasha's deportation and Daniel's rejection of his parents' planned future for himself. Then we move into the break into two, where Daniel invites Natasha to have coffee and she says yes. This is another joint beat. Their beat sheets are actually merged for most of the middle of the story. They're separate for most of the beginning and the end, as we'll see. So essentially the same beat. They are agreeing to have coffee together. They're having the same proactive decision. So both of their separate internal realizations have led to this decision. And so their act one was life before meeting each other and what that looked like for each of them. And now act two is life after meeting each other. In romances, it can be just this, the newness is the newness of the relationship. So the date gets off to a rocky start. However, when Natasha claims she doesn't believe in love, Daniel says he can get her to fall in love with him in one day. That sounds suspiciously like an act two goal. And I think it's super clever how Nicola Yoon has woven in a direction, a goal, a concreteness for her act two trajectory. So at the midpoint, after spending the good part of the day together, Natasha and Daniel share a passionate kiss in a noraebang, a Korean karaoke room. That feels like a victory for that goal, doesn't it? So we have a false victory midpoint here. It seems like Daniel's challenge is working. Natasha, although she knows she can't fall in love with Daniel when she might leave the country tonight, that's some internal realization that is being triggered by this external plot point, and Daniel can feel Natasha pulling away. It eventually leads to a fight that splits their beat sheets and them apart. There's that proactive decision as a result of the plot point. So after they've spent some time apart and their beat sheets have diverged, the beat sheets actually merge back together at the all is lost at the 80% mark or 75% mark, where Natasha's immigration lawyer is not able to stop Natasha's deportation. And this feels like a loss for both of them because they're both losing the relationship that they forged today. She will essentially have to leave tonight. Natasha feels more out of control than ever. And in our whiff of death, we see the death of this dream, the death of this relationship. At the break into three, we see the beat sheets actually diverge once more and separate as they both have their final proactive decisions for themselves. Daniel, after realizing that this immigration lawyer, who happens to be his Yale law interviewer, is not happy, even after following the right track and doing all the right things. This is Daniel's big aha moment. He walks out of the Yale interview and essentially makes the decision to derail his life for good. He wants to be with Natasha for as long as he can before she's forced to leave. And that's his act three goal, as simple as that. Natasha, on the other hand, has a slightly different break into three. After realizing how much Daniel has taught her today, her internal realization, she goes home and confronts her father, which is her proactive decision. And he is the true source of her struggle. And there we have her act three goal. She accepts the deportation as something out of her control and not the true source of her pain and anger. So there we see a multiple point of view in action. Once again, those were the 5 foundation beats. If you want to read the full 15 beat breakdown, I actually have it in the free companion ebook that I want to talk about right now. So we had a pre-order offer for this bonus ebook with all of these extra beat sheets. It ended yesterday, and then I woke up to a just slew of emails, tons and tons of people asking if they could still please get the bonus beat sheet. So we have decided to extend the offer to July 29th. So until July 29th, if you order or purchase any copy, any format from any retailer of Save the Cat Writes a Young Adult Novel by July 29th, and upload your proof of purchase at this link that's down at the bottom, and we'll get it put into the chat. You'll get a companion ebook with 100 pages of extra content. That's 5 bonus full 15 beat breakdowns of The Sun Is Also a Star, Long Way Down, a novel in verse by Jason Reynolds, Red Queen, a high fantasy by Victoria Aveyard, We Were Liars, a psychological thriller with an unreliable narrator, which was a very fun one to break down, and The Inheritance Games, a YA mystery. So all of those are available if you order the book. Upload your proof of purchase at jessicabrody.com/preorder. And then if you decide to support a US independent bookstore, there's actually a bonus gift where you'll get a free ticket to my live plot along workshop. So this is a one-time only event that I'm doing, 2-hour interactive workshop via Zoom, where you'll be able to watch as I plot a brand new YA novel live from scratch using my own book. And you'll be able to collaborate by voting on the details and the ideas. And of course, you can plot your novel along with me. So that will be on August 12th. The only way to get a ticket to this is to purchase a paperback copy of the book from a US indie bookstore. The recording will be available for rewatch. So if you don't make it live, you'll get the recording as well. So again, the link there is jessicabrody.com/preorder. You can get all the details, upload all your receipts, get all of your goodies. Now, if you don't live in the United States, there are some options on my website for international shipping from US bookstores. So I hope you'll take advantage of that. I hope you enjoy the new book. I hope you enjoy the bonus content. I hope you enjoyed our presentation today. And I am more than welcome to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Jessica. That was so great. We do have a good bit of Q&A to go through. For everyone, the link that Jessica gave you on the slide is in the chat, so you can just click it right from the chat if you would like. And we will try to get through as many of these questions now as we can. So jumping right in, our first one, Carol asks, any good Save the Cat recommendations for quiet novels which show a clear character and story arc?
Well, I would say the one I gave today is a pretty good one as well. So other books that I would recommend taking a look at is The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. I actually break that one down in the original book if you're looking for an adult. In Save the Cat YA, we've got To All the Boys I've Loved Before, which I consider a contemporary character-driven story. We've also got If I Stay, it also feels very contemporary to me. So yeah, I mean, lots of options for you there. And as we talked about today, you know, all character transformation needs plot in order to trigger it. The plot might be less higher stakes than like an action or a plot-driven story, but without plot to trigger character transformation, the character transformation will feel forced, will feel contrived. So the key is always to brainstorm the kind of plot events that feel organic to your story, to your character's world, to your character, but also what are the things that are really going to push your character? Think about the things that are going to aggravate their wounds, aggravate their flaws, push them out of their comfort zone. What are the things that are going to make them uncomfortable? Because that's what's going to push them into a transformation.
Our next question is from Chris, and he asks, when you choose a plot for your novel, do you consider what is popular among readers at the time you begin your novel, or do you set your own course using the plot that satisfies you?
Oh, such a great question. And a tough one too. As much as we would love to write the perfect book that's going to be perfect for the market at this moment, it's very impossible to do. All books take time to write, they take time to release, whether you're traditional publishing or self-publishing, traditional publishing especially. So I always warn authors never to write to trends. Because trends will be gone by the time your book comes out. So if you're noticing like, oh, everyone's writing, you know, like fairy romances right now, by the time your fairy romance comes out, fairy romances will be a thing of the past. It doesn't mean they won't come back around, but right now they'll probably won't be around. So I would urge you to write the story that you want to tell and not try to write to a trend. In terms of However, there are things that you should consider, which are what we call reader expectations, tropes. So if you're writing, like, let's say, a YA fantasy, you're going to want to study what YA fantasy readers like about YA fantasy, especially if it's like a high fantasy. And you're going to want to make sure that you're including the kind of things that are expected of a YA fantasy, and not saying like, oh, I'm going to write a YA fantasy, but it's going to be really different, and there's going to be very little fantasy and lots of other, like, I don't know, something else, then you're probably gonna have some disappointed readers. So there's a difference between genre expectations and writing to trends. So you want to make sure that you are hitting genre expectations for the genre you're writing in. But I would always say, write the book that inspires you, because that's the book you're going to have the best chance of being able to finish as well.
Crystal asks, in the case of multiple points of view, does each character need to hit all the beats in the 5-point finale?
So this person's referencing an advanced topic that you can read more about in the book called the 5-point finale. It's a breakdown of the finale beat into 5 subbeats to help us write really compelling finales. That's a great question. I don't think they all need to hit all 5 beats. And one of the books I break down in the new YA is a fantastic multiple POV fantasy called Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. It's got 3 points of view and 3 5-point finales that intertwine. I mean, it's a structural masterpiece. I had so much fun puzzling it together. So if you're interested in that, take a look. However, that one, yes, they all have those 5 points. But what I've noticed is sometimes you don't need all 5 points. Sometimes, not to get too nitty gritty into the 5-point finale, but sometimes, like, you don't need to have the assembling the team beat because the team's already been assembled. Actually, I have an example of that in the book too. And so you can kind of skip to the second beat. So no, I would argue that they don't all need to. And also I would say, just like with any beat with multiple points of view, the beats the 5 points can be joined. So the high tower surprise can be a high tower surprise for all POVs, or 2 of the 3, or whatever. It's flexible. Yeah.
Mata asks, I write horror and I get the impression that readers want to jump into the action or catalyst moment faster than 10%, but don't like prologues either. Do you have any tips for creating gripping setups without immediately jumping to the catalyst, or is accelerating the catalyst point to earlier, for example, 5%, okay in that genre?
So I think accelerating the catalyst beat is always okay. And it's actually one of the customizations I go into deeply in the new book, because been asked about it a lot. So that's one point, is that you can always move the catalyst up. You're going to have to, move around the other beats around it to make room. And I have some tips for that in the book too, if you want to go deeper. However, tips for getting that setup really, really strong is one thing I want to emphasize. For those of you who are familiar with all 15 beats, the setup is well, it's technically the 3rd beat, but it's pretty much what happens after the opening image. And I want to emphasize that the setup should never, ever, ever be boring. Just because we use the term status quo doesn't mean that the status quo should be like nothing happens. The ways that we can make sure that our setups are compelling is to always, always give your character something to be pursuing, what we call a want or a goal, which again can change later in the story. But having your character actively pursue something is a great way to pull your reader in. Why are they pursuing that? Why does it matter to them? Why do they care? What happens if they don't get it? When you have your reader asking questions, you have your reader turning pages. Another way to create questions in your reader's mind is to withhold information. What happened in the past that made everybody like this? Why is everyone afraid of that one house? Things like that. So withholding information, creating intrigue is also a great way. Anytime you put your character into action right away, it's also a great way to intrigue the reader. I break down a fantastic horror novel in the new YA book called Wilder Girls by Rory Power. And I love the way she starts it out. Even before the catalyst, there's all of this history in this boarding school where this virus has kind of like rampaged through and everyone's been like transformed. And there's so many questions of like, what is this virus? What has happened here? That we are so compelled to keep reading because we want to know more. So that's a great example of withholding information.
Eldon would like to know, what would you say to somebody who's afraid to use the STC method for fear that it would feel too formulaic?
Yeah, and that's something that I think a lot of people are concerned about as they see like the word blueprint and structure and template, and they're like, oh, that sounds like a formula. I think I would say to them, I would, if I were to counter that opinion, is I would say, well, that's kind of like saying that Stephen King is formulaic and Agatha Christie is formulaic and every great novel that you love is formulaic. If I can find the 15 beats in it, does that mean it's formulaic? maybe, maybe not. And then I usually will challenge people to say, what is bad about a formula? And I know that that has a negative connotation, but I like to look at it a different way. And I like to say, this is the structure that underlines the stories that people love. It's what readers are subconsciously looking for. They want a catalyst. They want the character to enter a new world. They want something to happen towards the midpoint. They don't know this, but they do, because it's what they are basically programmed to like. It's what they've been reading their whole life. And there are lots of ways you can customize these things. I would say that the 10 books I break down in Save the Cat Writes a Young Adult Novel are so entirely different. None of them feel classically formulaic to me or predictable, because they've all customized the midpoint in a very unique way. They've all given us unique characters. So I guess that's how I would say it, is that, readers are come into books and stories in general with certain expectations. And when we don't follow those expectations, we risk losing them. So that can be called a formula, or that can be called something else. It's really the way that you want to look at it. And then I usually say, also, there are no rules. There are no rules in storytelling. I wrote 2 books about, quote, the rules. The rules don't exist. You do what you want to do. You write the story you want to tell. That's why we write. And then, if you're having trouble with that story, if you're getting certain feedback with that story, then you might want to look at maybe a different structure method or my structure method and go, oh, okay, I can see why people are struggling through this part. Is because I don't have these certain elements. So in other words, it can also be used as just a way to, fix the experimental story that you're trying to tell.
Nancy asks, in regards to the percent marks that you use, does that refer to the beginning of the beat or the end? For example, does Break into Two start at 20% or end at 20%? That's
a great question. Something we didn't get to cover today in our limited time is actually the beats we covered today are all what are called single scene beats, meaning they all happen in one scene. The catalyst is a scene. The Break into Two is the scene where the character makes the decision. The midpoint is the turning point. So these are single scene beats, meaning they are happening at that percentage mark. And because scenes tend to not be longer than usually 10, 20, maybe 30 pages, they're probably not going to cover much more than just that percentage mark. On the other hand, there are other beats in the method that we call multi-scene beats that span multiple scenes or chapters. And in the book, you'll find those, and they'll be marked with a percentage range, like the setup is 1 to 10%, and then you kind of know where that range is.
For those of you wondering, we are over in time, but Jessica's graciously offered to stay for an extra 10 minutes, so we will have time to get a couple more questions in. But yes, we are over our time, so if anyone has to leave, you're welcome to catch the rest of this on the replay. We have an anonymous attendee who asks, how low is too low? I realize that sometimes if you do too much, the hero can't recover.
Great question. That is something really only you can answer for your story, your genre, and your audience. The thing, if you're writing a middle grade, then yeah, there are places you might not want to go for your all is lost. Even maybe I would argue a YA, but a lot of people would say that's not true. So you have to know your audience. You have to know who you're writing for. If you're writing sort of like a light, whimsical, contemporary comedy, then yeah, there are some places that'll be too low for that genre. If you're writing sort of a darker story, then maybe there's not places that are too low. And then at the same time, like you said, there might be places that the character can't come back from. And that's again going to go back to your individual character and your individual audience and those genre expectations that we talked about already.
Kelly asks, for a romance novel, which Save the Cat book would you recommend?
Oh, good question. They both have a romance example. So the Save the Cat method goes a little deeper than the 15 beats. We actually break down in both books. I break down what are called this 10 Save the Cat story genres. And these are not like romance and mystery and sci-fi, but they're actually genres of story type. But the one that romance typically fits into is a genre called the buddy love, which usually consists of two characters who, or maybe even three, who sort of need each other to complete their character transformations. And there's usually a complication that's keeping them apart. So both books do have a buddy love example in them. In Save the Cat Writes a young adult novel, it's The Fault in Our Stars. In Save the Cat Writes a novel, it's Everything, Everything by Nicola Yoon. So I would say, whichever one kind of, actually both of those are YA, so it doesn't actually matter which one you read. They're both going to be YA. So it's really just a matter of which one kind of speaks to you. If you're writing a YA book in general, then yeah, the YA book's probably going to help you out a little more, because the breakdown of the buddy love genre includes a lot of other examples for, what to do within the buddy love. And then of course, if you get that bonus ebook by buying the YA book, then you'll get the breakdown for The Sun Is Also a Star too, which is another romance example or buddy love example.
I think we have time for one more question. This comes from Patsy, who asks, if you have a novel with multiple points of view, do all of them need a beat sheet and character arc?
So the way that I like to think about POV is, well, okay. So first I usually ask how expansive is that POV? Is it a POV that gets equal page time to other POVs, roughly? If that's the case, then I would consider all POVs who have equal page time, I would consider them heroes. So you have multiple heroes. So the first step is to define how many heroes do you have? Because you can have points of view that are not heroes. And Wilder Girls that I break down in Save the Cat YA is a great example of a book that has two POVs, only one's the hero. So there's lots of reasons you would want to do that. If you are labeling them and you're giving them what I call the hero crown, like this, you are a hero, you are bestowed with the hero crown, then yes, they need full character transformations. Otherwise, they're gonna feel like the weak link of the group. If they are not put in the story to be transformed, why are they given that much page time? So when you think about who you're putting in the story, whose POVs who you're giving POVs to, we also want to be thinking about why. Why am I giving that person a POV? And the answer, if they're a hero, is because they transform. So in that sense, yes, they should all have full character transformations. Keep in mind, you're going to have less page time to do those character transformations. So you're going to have to be, the more POVs you have, the more strategic you have to be with your pages and your scenes. That's, a whole other topic. But so I would argue, yes, they all have to have character transformations, and then they all do have to have the 15 beats. But as we talked about before with the different types of multiple POVs, is that beats can be shared. So one catalyst can apply to 3, 4, 5 characters. In Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, which is broken down in full in the new YA book, there's 5 POVs and they share all the same beats. So because they're a team of criminals on a heist, the beats are all affecting them at the same time, and the same beats are affecting them at the same time, but they're all 5 are having different character transformations because of those beats. And that's where we get the really kind of cool story arc versus character arc when it comes to multiple POVs. How are these beats affecting these different characters in your story? And how are they bringing about that character transformation uniquely for each? It's a fun puzzle, and I wish you all the best of luck. Multiple POV is not for the faint of heart, but it is fun, and I've done it, and it's a lot of fun. So I wish you the best of luck with that. I wish you all the best of luck with your stories. I'm so grateful that you all took the extra time to stick around, and that you even came today to share your Tuesday with me. That's amazing. And I couldn't have asked for a better release party than to share it with all of you.
Well, we're so glad to have you here with us, Jessica. Thank you so much for coming, and the best of luck on the release of your new book. I hope that it does phenomenally well for you. We're sorry if we didn't get to your questions. We do still have a lot open, but we are very much out of time at this point. So thank you all for being here, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.